What does it feel like to be physically present in a classroom but completely invisible? Dr. Michelle Chanda Singh, founder of The Restful Teacher, takes us back to her experience as a 9-year-old Jamaican immigrant, succeeding academically but disconnected from the learning. Then she introduces us to Ms. Fernandez, the Spanish teacher who changed everything by making education human, relational, and joyful. This conversation will inspire you and may shift how you think about belonging in your classroom. This is Schoolutions Teaching Strategies, the podcast that extends education beyond the classroom. A show that isn't just theory, but practical, try it tomorrow approaches for educators and caregivers to ensure every student finds their spark and receives the support they need to thrive. I am Olivia Wall, and I am so happy to be here today with Dr. Michelle Chanda Singh. And Michelle, this conversation has been almost, my gosh, I think a year in the making of us going back and forth, coordinating calendars. So I'm so happy to have you here. If it's okay with you, I'm going to tell listeners a little bit about you.
Absolutely.
All right. Dr. Michelle Chanda Singh is a nationally board certified teacher and founder of The Restful Teacher and LCTE Learning Solutions. Our conversation today will focus on her ASCD article, Storytelling Can Bridge Cultural Gaps, and her TED Talk, How Cultural Representation Improves Education. Michelle, these topics are needed now more than ever. Our stories matter, our children's stories matter, and I cannot wait to have you speak to this for listeners today. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to finally be together with you to record
Yes,
this.
yes, same. Um, I am playing with a different structure moving forward into the new year, and I've shared this with you. So we're going to record part one as well as part two and release both in 1 week. So this is part one of our conversation. And it's really for listeners to better know your story and the ripple effects of how that impacted the way you lived as an educator in the classroom, but also an advocate for storytelling. So take us back. What is a piece of research that you lean on or a researcher that we can also look into to have our backs when it comes to storytelling?
I will say that a researcher that is just the foundation of all of my work is culturally responsive pedagogy with Gloria Ladson-Billings because her work focuses on bringing in the cultural experiences of students and making them just aware and making them feel seen. And I think the story is just a natural part of that. So although she may not specifically have story as one of her tenets, it's embedded in there.
Yeah. So I want listeners to better know your story. And I want to go all the way back to when you were 9 years old, newly arrived in the States, and what it felt like for you to not be seen in the way you needed to be, and yet expected to learn and be fully engaged in the classroom.
Yeah, so I came to the United States at 9 years old. I'm originally from Jamaica, and my family decided to move to America for a better life, for more access to education. So education has always been a priority and a foundation in my family and in my upbringing. But what I've learned from that 9-year-old girl to me in 40 plus as an educator as an educator and researcher, because I really don't remember my age. My daughter has to remind me. Once you get past 40, like, everything's a
It's
blur.
a blur. I agree. I'm
But
with you.
but what I've learned, just, from my adult lens looking back and going back to those experiences and being, like I said, being an educator and being a researcher, invisibility that I felt in, the classroom and the school setting and the environment being just so new to this country, that invisibility that I felt, it didn't show up as conflict. Sure, there were times where people made fun of me because of my accent, because of how I looked, and because of my hair, and, because I just sometimes look different from some of the kids. Sure, that was there, but when it came to the actual learning, that invisibility, it wasn't loud. For me, it was subtle. For me, it showed up, as silence in the curriculum. It showed up as me not necessarily, like, feeling connected,
Yeah.
seeing the relevance, feeling like what I was learning was relatable. Uh, the learning did not stick to where I remembered it now, right? It I learned it to be compliant.
Yeah.
Learning just was not joyful in that way. And so I realized that, yeah, I was physically present, and sure, I did well academically, but it was out of what I realized, it was out of compliance. Because, yeah, the traditional curriculum, especially back then, it really just did not reflect my lived reality as someone who was an immigrant who just came here from this country, who is multicultural because my mom is Indian, my father is Black, and so I have all of these things that are a part of my identity, but I can't find them anywhere else,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I just learned to succeed without being fully seen and without being able to fully express my true and real identity. I'll tell you this, in school, friends would see me, and then if they were good friends and they would come to my house and they would meet my family and they would see all these Indian people, they would be shocked.
Yeah. This is also making me think of, Mal's work with funds of knowledge, and
Oh,
it
yes,
just
yes, yes.
right?
Mhm.
And
Yes.
so I think, our stories, who we are, it's so important to feel seen in these environments, and then just some statistics, because it was also fascinating to me to learn that you didn't actually feel seen until much later in your
Mhm.
academic career. So, for listeners to better understand, right now, 54% of students are of color in our schools, 82% of teachers are not, 7% of teachers are Black, and only 2% of teachers are Black males. Those are current statistics. And that to me, then, if you fast forward in your educational career, you did not really crack open the idea of being seen and heard as an educator until Miss Fernandez came into your life. Um, and you had said it was an explosion of cultural community, and that humanizing ourselves is what made you finally say, "Whoa, there's something here." So can you speak to that? Like, why do we have to humanize ourselves as teachers?
Well, so Miss Fernandez came in early. Luckily, Miss Fernandez was earlier on. I had Miss Fernandez 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade because she was my Spanish teacher. And back then in elementary school, Miss Fernandez taught me for like 1 hour out of the day. Not every day, but it was just 1 hour. And the Spanish teachers would come to the classrooms where our general education teachers were. And, they would do what they do.
Yeah.
And with Miss Fernandez, I talk about her a lot because she was the one that made me realize that education is not just about performing. It's not just about perfecting. It's not just about people pleasing. And she's the one that made me see how important it is to prioritize connection, to prioritize relationship, and to also make learning not feel transactional, but relational. So, just a few things that I can remember. Like, again, I'm talking about the little 9-year-old me, and
Yeah.
I remember these things. So, remember, I talked about learning not being joyful and learning not sticking. That was the majority of what I experienced. But Miss Fernandez stands out because that learning for me was joyful. Like, I remember her teaching us these songs in Spanish and learning the language. I remember her teaching me how to make café con leche. And I felt so grown because I'm drinking, granted, we do drink, coffee in Jamaica, and we're known for the Blue Mountain coffee, but still, we're here we're there in class making café con leche. She would have her La Tiendas every Friday, and we would earn like fake money and tickets. And we would get to go and visit the store and purchase, and we would have to speak in Spanish. She took us on field trips to Spanish restaurants where we had to order in Spanish. She took us to this one time, like this magic shop. Like, I remember these things from like the fourth and fifth and sixth
It's
grade
amazing.
because I was learning the language, I was immersed in the culture, and I was learning. That's the point. The learning was relational. The learning was connected.
Yeah.
Um, and Miss Fernandez, she she was only around, like I said, for part of the day, like 1 hour in the day. But my experience with her showed me how important her culture was to her. And then, for me, it also made me kind of feel like, okay, my culture is important to me too. So there was this not an incident, but one situation I remember when I first came from Jamaica. In Jamaica, when we speak to our teachers, we stand up out of respect. So I'm sitting in class and they would call on me to answer questions, and I would stand up every single time to answer a question. And the kids would laugh at me, like, why is this little child standing up? Right. And this happened for a while, but then it was Miss Fernandez who kinda told me, like, "Michelle, I know what you're doing, this is" obviously not these words because it was so long ago, but this is the
Right.
gist of what I got from it. It is okay to not stand up and you can still respect your teachers. Because for me, the respect was the act of standing because that's
Yes.
what we were taught in Jamaica. But she was giving me permission to do something different and still honoring, what I did in my culture.
I think something that makes me just reflect on is when I first started teaching, I was teaching in California and San Diego, and I had many, many different children from countries that had moved to this school district as refugees. And I went from teaching fifth grade down to kindergarten. And it was such a difference because in fifth grade, there was a lot of tradition and a lot of inborn culture that the kids had as patterns, but once the kids were I was teaching kindergarten, it was fascinating to see that they were trying to see how they fit within the overall, culture, but thinking of Miss Fernandez and the common, equal playing field of learning a language together. I'm inferring that your classmates did not know Spanish either, and she was coming in, and it almost gave you that fertile ground to come in and be a part of something new and fresh with the
Mhm.
class, and so I think there's so much to be said about her. Um, I'd love to end part 1 with a lightning round, and I have a Miss Fernandez question tucked in there. Are you ready for lightning round?
I'm ready.
Here we
Let's
go.
do it.
All right. So, one of my favorite things about you, you offer really amazing resources for us to lean on. So, you've recommended StoryCourse, Smithsonian, Zen Education Project, PBS Learning Media. What is the top resource like tomorrow that we could go to learn more about storytelling?
To learn more about storytelling, I think that I would go with of those resources that are listed, I would go with Zen Education or PBS Learning Media. They're so rich, but because there's so much in them, I would offer this. Start with listening because listening for me is always where belonging begins because we are listening to understand, right? So find the resources that will allow you to listen to understand the other perspective, the other experiences, the other cultures, whatever that looks like.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right. What's a storytelling requirement that you think would be really helpful for teachers to have in place in classrooms?
Storytelling is not just limited to what's in our textbooks and what they tell us to teach. I would I would recommend that they can incorporate their own stories. They can incorporate their students' stories. They can make room for the stories of their parents and families and community members,
Yeah.
because these are the stories that won't show up in the textbook. These are the stories that won't show up online. There are, and I talk about this in my TED Talk, because these are the stories that the students will just, they will feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just feel. And when you feel, you're in it. So you can create these inclusive spaces where students belong by incorporating these stories from places that you wouldn't normally look for them. But it starts with your story. I'll say that, because when you share your story, you become human. And when students see that you're human, it gives them now permission to be human too.
Oh, that's beautiful. Last lightning round question was we wrap part one. What would Miss Fernandez say if she heard how you're advocating for story and just to be seen in the way she saw you?
But she would definitely smile, and, I think she would say that she was proud of me, for sure, because she often told me that. Like, I remember I was in the I made it to the Spanish spelling bee on at the district level, and she was like the chaperone, so she was there, like, every step of the way. So I would definitely, like, see her look of pride, for sure.
Beautiful. Oh,
Yeah,
well, I can't wait for part two because we're going to get into kind of the nitty gritty and on the ground suggestions for classroom teachers of how to get this going in their spaces. So I look forward to that part of our conversation as well. Thanks, Michelle.
absolutely, thank you.
Okay, so that's where we'll pause part one for today. On Friday, we're continuing this conversation with part two. We're getting practical. Michelle will share specific tools for digital storytelling, why your guest speakers need to reflect your students' lived experiences, and what it means to raise classrooms, not just support them. Take a moment this week to think about your own story. What's one experience from your life, your culture, your family, your journey that you could share with your students? Start small, share one story that humanizes you, and watch what happens when your students see you're human too. Notice how it shifts the energy in your classroom. Make sure to tune in every Monday and Friday for part 1 and 2 of my guest conversations with the best research-backed coaching and teaching strategies you can apply right away to better the lives of the children in your care. And look for your 60-second bite-sized piece of learning on Wednesdays from our conversation to share with a colleague. Take care, and thank you for forever getting better with me. Have a great week ahead.